If you are using our CenterPoint Accounting for Business, or if you have our CenterPoint Agriculture or CenterPoint Fund accounting programs with the additional accounts receivable module, there are going to be two screens now for entering in customer invoices. The first screen involves a multi-tab screen and is a little more detailed. The second screen is a single, more consolidated entry screen where everything is entered in on the same screen. You can really enter in the same details on both screens. It's just the layout of those screens, and one is a little more consolidated than the other. We are going to be talking about the quick entry screen, which is the consolidated entry screen in this video. Currently, as a default on your quick list over here, the customer invoice screen that you would go to if you clicked on customer invoices here happens to be the one that is the multi-tab entry system. So on this one, if I choose a customer here, for example, you'll notice that it allows us to do things like display the billing address and the shipping address and change those right from this tab. All of the detail items about this invoice would then be entered in from the invoice tab over here. So this would allow us to enter in the items that were sold and adjust any freight charged and things like that down here. Okay, so that option on the quick list actually takes us to this multi-tab screen rather than the consolidated screen that we're talking about. So you can get to the consolidated screen by going to Processes and Sales and to Customer Invoices Quick Entry. Okay, and you can see that instead of having two tabs here, everything is laid out on one screen. If you want to add this screen to your quick list, you can right-click on the Sales grouping on that quick list unless you've modified the quick list and removed that grouping. You can right-click on whatever grouping you want then. So I'm going to right-click on the Sales grouping and then go to Manage Items. And then under Manage Items, I'm going to open up Processes, Sales, and I'm going to click on this Customer Invoice Quick Entry screen and add it to my quick list. So now I have both of them on my quick list. If you decide that you want to use one or the other, you could remove one of them from your quick list by just right-clicking on it and choosing to remove it. So the customer invoice screen here is very similar to the other customer invoice screen. It's just laid out a little bit different. I'm going to start out with choosing my company, and then I'm going to go ahead and choose the customer that I'm entering in this invoice for. So I go ahead and select my customer. Now, it has two, normally on the other customer invoice screen that had two tabs, you saw that when I selected the customer, it showed us a billing address and a shipping address, and you notice that those aren't appearing here. So there is a button just to the right of the customer that you can either tab to or click on, which would allow you to change the billing address and shipping address for that customer right here on this screen, and also override any sales tax that's defaulting in there. Okay, the second button next to the customer would allow you to see any notes that have been added about this customer and to add any notes to there. So if I wanted those notes to also have a timestamp, I could first add in the timestamp and then go ahead and type in a note. So this is a note, okay. I don't really need to have that note there, but I just wanted to show you how you could add a note to this customer. Now, I'm going to click OK on that. If I want that note, though, to actually print on the actual invoice, then I'm going to have to do two things. I'm going to right-click on the customer here itself, and I'm going to choose to edit that customer. On the customer record, there's a little checkbox on the bottom left-hand corner here that says Print Notes on Forms. So that button or that box has to be checked in order for us to print the notes on any of our forms. And then the form itself has to have the notes field attached to it. Okay, so that would need to be done in order for that to print on the form. From there, it's going to go to the invoice number, and this is going to use the same sequences as our other invoice screen. And then I can go ahead and choose the date of this invoice and then put in any customer PO number if it's provided. Of course, I could add these invoices to a batch just like I could any other transaction. It's going to show the customer balance right below that, and then it's going to default the terms of for that invoice in the box below that. If you want to change those terms or create new terms, you can just by clicking on the lookup. And if you need to create any new terms, you can go ahead and click the new button down there. I did not have a default salesperson assigned to this customer, so it didn't default a salesperson, but I could go ahead and choose that salesperson here. And then of course, if my preferences had been set up to calculate commissions on the salesperson, then as I enter in the items, the amount of commission will show up here. If I had taken and said that commission was calculated on each item separately, then as I choose each item, it will show the sales commission over on the line here if I have that field selected to show on the grid there. I can also assign a specific sales commission to this entire invoice by overriding any calculations and just typing in an amount here that we want to give as far as commission to that salesperson. Okay, then I'm going to go ahead and select the different items that I've sold to them. So I'm going to go ahead and we are going to enter in that he purchased an economy bike package and he purchased 5 of those. There is a field here which is showing us the description of what he purchased. So he purchased an economy bike package. There's also a field next to it, which is a button, which is going to show me any additional description that was entered in on that particular item. Okay, I could also add to that description. So if I wanted to add additional description to it, this additional description does print on the invoice. This customer was set up as a taxable customer and the item was set up as a taxable item. Therefore, this is checked as taxed. If I want to, I could override the taxes and say that it's not taxed by going ahead and unchecking that box. And then, of course, then the amount of tax calculated is 0 on it. Okay, I'm going to put it back and then you see there it goes in, it calculates the taxes. Okay, any other information that you need to be able to adjust or see on these particular items, you can add columns to this grid for. So I've added columns for profit center and location. But you see here that if I right click and I go to add remove columns, that I also have some additional columns that could be added here as well. So if I wanted to show the quantity available, the quantity assigned, if I was using tracking numbers, I could go ahead and put those in here. If I wanted to go ahead and assign this to a project, I could add that project column. So any additional columns that you want to be visible on this screen, you could go ahead and add there. Okay, I'm going to drop down to the next line and say that we're entering in a standard bike package too that they purchased, and they purchased 3 of those. And then down below, you're going to see here, right now, I only see here 1 line for this item, but as I see each item on here, there might be additional information that I want to show about that item. So there is underneath the options button here, the ability to show an information grid. If I do that, then you notice that this little grid comes up down below here, where for the standard bike package that I'm on, I've added some columns such as what is the suggested price? And if it had a vendor part number entered in, I'm also showing the vendor part number. To add columns to this show information grid, all I have to do is right click on that grid itself and go to add remove columns, and I would be able to add any additional columns too. So if I had assigned a trade discount to that item and I wanted the trade discount to show here, I could go ahead and show what the trade discount is. Okay. So we can toggle that information grid on or off. So it's up to you whether or not you want that to display. Below that is a memos comments button. The memo fields can be accessed from that button. So if you wanted a memo to print on the invoice, you could go ahead and enter in the memo here. It also allows you to bring up the comments and the additional custom fields that you might have set up for all of your transactions. So you have a place here to enter in any comments. And if you had set up additional fields, then that field name would be here and a place for you to enter in the values into those fields. Okay, from there then it's going to go down to my shipping method. I can override what the default shipping method is there, or I can move on to the next item, which is the freight. Okay, so if I'm charging freight on this invoice, I could enter in that additional freight here. Okay, now that freight is a revenue. The account that it is using can be found underneath the accounts button here. And this is the account that is going to put freight income to. I could override that account. So if I want it to go to a different account, I can override that account. So any of these accounts that were set up as defaults in your preferences, you have the ability to overwrite here. I can also charge that freight to a particular profit center. So if I wanted to, I could, assign this to the profit center of biking equipment and service and to the location of Minnesota, my Minnesota store. Okay. So I probably would have done that to each one of these lines as well, that it was going to bike equipment and service and to the Minnesota store. So I'm going to go ahead and enter that onto each one of those lines there. Okay. I also, after the freight, have the ability to override or see what taxes are being calculated. So I've assigned the Red Wing sales tax to this, which includes these different jurisdictions. Okay, so I can come in here and adjust any sales tax amounts manually if I needed to, or I could change the sales tax that's being used. From there then, I have the ability to put in any miscellaneous charges and also to assign those miscellaneous charges to a profit center location and so on. From there then too, I have the ability to either apply a deposit to this. Now, if I have my preference set up, if I go to options down here and I go to apply customer deposits, there's two preferences for applying customer deposits. If there was a deposit out there, I can have it automatically applied to this invoice, or I could say that I want to manually apply customer deposits to an invoice. Either way, I have mine set up to automatically apply customer deposits. Therefore, I know I don't have a customer deposit because none was applied. But let's say that they brought in a check and they want you to apply that check right now to this invoice. I can go ahead and say that they went ahead and brought us cash. We're going to deposit it into this bank account. It was paid by check. This is what their check number is. And let's say that they paid us $250. So it'll deduct the $250 from the remaining amount due. Okay. Over here on the bottom left, it has marked this invoice as that I want to print it because I set that up when I set up the customer. I'm just going to edit the customer for a second. And I'm going to show you that when I set up this customer, there was an email and print tab. And on that email and print tab, I defaulted it and said that when I put in an invoice for this customer, I want that print invoice button to be defaulted to checked. And I did that by saying yes there. Okay, therefore it default checked that. Okay, now I actually have the wrong form selected in my preferences. So I really want to be using the system default form, and I'm actually am doing 2 copies of that. Okay, if I was emailing this to that customer, again, that was part of the setup of the customer there, I would have the ability to go ahead and override any default subject lines and messages that were going to go out in that email, and then the invoice itself would be attached to the email down here at the bottom. right? But if I have no other options there that I need to select, I'm actually ready to save this invoice, and that is the customer invoice quick entry screen.